What's up, safari lovers? I'm Brian. Welcome to Safari Life, the channel dedicated to all things safari. Today I'm going to chat about wildlife photography for beginners, trying to keep it as simple as possible. So maybe you've been online, YouTube, whatever, and you see a lot of conflicting and confusing info about what brand to choose and what level of camera to buy. I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter. If someone is out there, a fanboy, spruiking one brand over another because they say, this is the one that's going to get you good wildlife shots better than the other brands, well, they're not a very good photographer, because any decent wildlife photographer can take any of the three major brands for wildlife photography, that is Sony, Nikon and Canon, because they have the greatest number of lenses that are suitable for wildlife, and take good photos, and you can too. So don't get bogged down in brands. And there are at least a few influencers out there that have a relationship with a certain manufacturer, and you'll figure that out pretty quickly, and they really promote certain brands. Don't worry about it. The brand doesn't matter. You're the one that matters. A camera is just a tool. Now, I'm sure there's people that think I'm a tool, but that doesn't matter. This is just a tool. It's you that's driving this that makes all the difference. Don't worry about the brand. When you go to a camera store, for instance, and you can play around with a number of cameras, just see how they feel in your hand, look at your budget and stick within that budget. Don't get FOMO about, you see all these people that are talking like if you don't get the greatest camera, you're never going to get good shots or great shots. You will. You don't need the latest and greatest. It's like no one ever took a decent photo until someone bought the latest and greatest camera. It's a load of rubbish. Just keep within your budget. Even from entry-level, cameras are very powerful tools now. The processors are powerful, the computing power is powerful. Entry-level cameras have a spec that is better than the top-of-the-line cameras from 10 or 12 years ago. So stick to your budget. Don't worry about the brand thing. If you decide to pick a certain model of camera from any of the brands, I suggest you go on a site called Juzza Photo. It is a photo sharing site that I use, and you don't even have to be a member. You can go on there, just select cameras and lenses and pick the model of the camera or the lens, go on there and just check out the photos. People will rate them out of 10, and they'll also, some people put a comment about how they feel. It's Italian, it's Google Translate, you can read between the lines. Check out the photos, because that's where the proof is. That's the proof in the pudding, and you'll see how many cameras can take good photos. DSLRs probably hit their peak when most of the bugs were ironed out in the last 7 years or so. And then there's just small increments of improvement after that. Mirrorless are getting to that now. So I'm going to now talk about the spruiking of one system over another, DSLR versus mirrorless. I can tell you from the thousands of photos I've seen, from a purely image quality stance, there is no difference if you have a like-for-like mirrorless and DSLR in specification. There is no difference. If I was going to say which one I would steer someone beginning wildlife photography, would be two mirrors for this one reason alone, and it's not to do with image quality. It's because they're the future and DSLRs are being phased out. However, because DSLRs are being phased out, they're often quite a bit cheaper like-for-like in specs to a mirrorless. So if that's in your budget, don't worry about it. Get a DSLR. You'll have years and years of fantastic shooting with a DSLR if that's what's in your budget. I've had this camera for 4 years now, and at the moment I'm not going to change to mirrorless because it's still taking good photos. I will eventually, but they do a fantastic job in my experience. The quality of third-party lenses. So I can totally respect anyone that likes to have a Canon-made lens on a Canon-made camera, or Nikon or Sony, whatever their original manufacturer lenses are. However, in the last maybe 5 years, 6 years, the third-party lenses from Tamron and Sigma, and I mention those because they're the ones that do a lot of lenses suitable for wildlife. I've been shooting Sigma for years, and I've been happy with them. I have a 7200 Sigma here. I have my 500 f4. I've got a 50mm on taking this video, which I almost never use on Safari. Got this one. Don't worry about this sort of stuff. You don't need it. I like it, but you don't need it. The most popular lens that I see on Safari is Canon's 100 to 400mm lens. So it's the most popular lens. It's not just because it's a Canon, it's the range, that 100 to 400. It is a really good lens, really good image quality, and I know a lot of pros that actually use that as their primary lens now. They've gotten rid of all their big, expensive stuff, and that's what they shoot with. Nikon has a 80 to 400, which don't get it if you're shooting Nikon because it's in that range. You'll be far better off, because it's not very good, you'll be far better off getting a 100 to 400 from Tamron or Sigma. And you can use something like a 1.4 teleconverter if you need a bit more reach. But that's my suggestion. Now, if you're going to do a lot of birding, then I think you should be looking at something that's maybe 500 or 600 mils. And you can see a lot of lenses in that kind of zoom range, say 150 to 600 or 60 to 600, 100 to 500. Look at those if you're going to do a lot of birding over a 100 to 400. But if you're mainly going on safari with big game, honestly, compared to shooting birds, general wildlife is like shelling peas. So it's a good thing to do a bit of bird photography, because you can shoot something about that big that's flitting around all over the show. Shooting something huge is easy peasy. So think about that. Again, it's the skill of the person behind the camera that's ultimately going to make all the difference. I would say lenses are more important than the camera body you choose. Think of a lens as an eye and the camera as a brain. If you've got wonky vision, it doesn't matter how the acuity of your brain is, it cannot turn a bad image from an average lens. So steer clear of those kit lenses that come with the camera and look at something good. Okay, let's talk about camera settings quickly. It looks like a minefield when you first look at it. I've changed like 5 things in every camera body that I've had. And the main ones are, if you've got 2 card slots, how you assign the second slot, whether you want it to be an overflow if the first one fills up. You can use it as a backup, so it's taking the same image on both cards, and if you only have 1 card slot, well, it doesn't matter. So that's for 2 card slots. Image quality set to RAW, because it gives you more finesse when you go, functionality when you go into editing, and you will want to get into editing photos at some stage, not just using the free stuff on your laptop or desktop. ISO sensitivity, set it to auto, and then set your maximum that you want. I usually use around 3200 for most, because that's, most cameras can manage the ISO 3200 without getting too noisy and grainy, but you can go up to wherever you want and just play around with that. Number of focus points, whatever the maximum you've got in your camera, set it to the maximum, and set your metering to matrix. Ta-da! That's it. You don't really need to do much more than that. I've been taking photos for years and years and years with those settings, and I'm pretty happy with my results. Formatting memory cards, whenever you get a new memory card, put it in there, go to formatting, yes. How to adjust your camera when you get a brand new camera, or any camera, whether you get a second hand or brand new. Put a lens on, try and focus on something. If it looks a little bit out of focus, out of whack, you have a thing called a diopter. Move that. That one's like a little wheel. You've got another one that's like a side wheel that you move up and down, and move that until it gets in focus for your eyesight, because that's how it works. It's getting in focus for your eyesight. So no matter what lens you put on there after that, if you're changing lenses, once you've adjusted that diopter to be, for the camera to be in focus for your shots, it just keeps working. 3 main adjustments you use. Try and learn to use manual from the get-go. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. You're going to change mainly 3 things when you're in manual. Again, let the ISO auto do its thing in the camera. You can, in manual, change that value of the ISO you've set in ISO auto. You can do that, but you're going to use shutter speed, aperture, and you've got little wheels that you change to change the aperture and shutter speed, and then you've also got a button that will look something like that, and that's for exposure compensation, which will make your images brighter or darker depending on the lighting. So if you're working at a certain aperture or shutter speed and you're finding I need that to get a shot, but you find them too dark, you can use exposure compensation. You can also use that to do things like high key and low key photography. So I suggest just check that out. It's pretty simple stuff. 3 must for beginners. Learn back button focus. It's a tip I got from wildlife photographers at the very start, and to me it is really important. It's a great and simple tip. So normally, as you would know, most people have to press the shutter to get focus and then push down to take a shot. Back button focus, you've either got a dedicated button here called AF on. You hold that down. My camera will focus both ways, but you hold that down with your thumb and it'll try to acquire focus because you'll set it to AF continuous. That's what you want. That's Nikon speak. I think in Canon it's servo, and I'm not sure about Sony, so any of those shooters, if you just clarify that in the comments below, that'd be great. But think of this as like when you're holding it down to be like a radar for a missile. Okay, it's looking to acquire the subject. And you hold that down and continue without taking any shots, and then the shutter button becomes like the launcher for your shot. So once you got this focus, you keep your thumb down the whole time, even when you're shooting a burst, because your camera will keep trying to, in that way, acquire focus. So keep that down and use that as your trigger. Boom, that's all it is. Just press down, thumb down, press down, away you go. Shoot as much as possible. Tip number 2. Go out to your local park or your duck pond or whatever. Just keep shooting away, playing with your aperture, playing with your shutter speed, playing with the compensation button. Just muck around with those things, shoot as much as possible. My number 1 tip doesn't get talked about a lot when people talk about tips for beginners or anyone. Be aware of everything in the frame. Side to side, top to bottom, corner to corner. Always be aware of everything in the frame. Now, a scenario would be, think of it this way. You're out in the field, you're on safari, the guide can see that there's a leopard coming towards the road where it's going to be nice and open, you get a nice shot. You get giddy with the excitement, you're ready. You get it in focus. Leopard comes out in the road, beautiful. You got it in focus, you're focusing on the eye, which you should be doing in wildlife photography. Or you have one of those good eye tracking systems that they have in a lot of the modern cameras now. Fantastic, and you're firing away bursts and that, and you're on focus and everything's great, and then leopard moves off and you look at the back of your camera and you've cut off the tail or you've cut off the feet. Be aware of everything in the frame, what you want in the frame and what you don't want in the frame, and that's my number 1 tip for beginners to wildlife photography. I'll touch briefly on editing. I use Lightroom. It's not an endorsement of one over the other. I also have Photoshop, which I haven't played around with much, but I've been using Lightroom for a year. I find it very intuitive and easy to kind of learn and get yourself a base level. So take a bunch of shots, download them on your computer, upload them into Lightroom, and just play around with all the sliders. There's 6, 7, 8 things that you may use for every shot. Just play around with them. You cannot ruin your shot by editing them, because if you're not happy with the edit, you can just hit revert and go back to the original image and start again, or you can do like a split screen where you have the original and your edited version, and you can just look how they change. So get that baseline to start with. Don't get too heavy into tutorials. There is a site I'll mention, or sites I mentioned, which are very good at tutorials and keeping them simple. I also have Topaz denoise and Topaz sharpening, and they do exactly what, or AI sharpening and AI denoise, and they do exactly what they say. They sharpen images while they reduce noise in the image. Now, people may comment that Lightroom does that. They have a function for it, but in my experience, these are quicker. The algorithms are fantastic. They both have a sharpening, like sharpening has a denoise tool and a denoise slider, and denoise has a sharpening tool. But they are really built fit for purpose. So I have both because they're optimized for their function, whether to denoise or add sharpening. So once I've finished my editing in Lightroom, I ship them off and I go through and I look at them and see what tweaks I can make if I think they need to in both those programs. I'm going to mention 3 sites on YouTube to watch, and this is about all you need, because these people are great photographers, really humble, really passionate about wildlife and being out in nature. Just watch these three and you should have enough. Steve Perry, Pangolin Photo Safaris, Morten Hilmer. You want to see Morten Hilmer, you want to see people just out in the field. He shoots Nikon. He doesn't sit around just waving the flag about the camera. You'll see what wildlife photography, it's about your artistry. It's your vision. When you go out there, it's your creativity. When you get your camera, what you want from your photograph, and you'll see that. And that's the most important thing. This is your art when you start in it. This is going to be your art form for capturing wildlife. So check those out. Pangolin are really good at doing simple Lightroom tutorials, but get your baseline first, and then they will show you some of the more artistic tools you can use in Lightroom, for instance. I'll put links down below for those three YouTube channels. So thanks for watching. If you found it helpful, give it a thumbs up. If you've got comments or questions, put them in the section below. Subscribe if you haven't, and share if you wouldn't mind. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.